Here at Safeguard, we've helped hundreds of families retire, and through this, we notice a lot of patterns and commonalities. For instance, in the first stretch of retirement, there are many realizations that retirees have that oftentimes go against previously held beliefs. In today's video, I want to walk through 7 of those realizations. Now, considering these 7 things prior to retirement will help you transition far better to this next phase of your life. Let's get into it. The first big realization is that you get far more from your job than you first may think. Many workers think the hardest thing about retirement will be wrapping their heads around living off of their savings rather than living off a paycheck. In reality, the hardest transitions are all around the other things. How will you reinvent your identity or replace your sense of purpose that you had while you were working? While working, you're generally part of a team. Maybe you even lead that team. Everyone is rowing in the same direction, and you probably feel really good about the value that you help deliver to the world. Well, when that is gone, what will replace it? A lot of retirees will find a new identity and new purpose, oftentimes just as, if not more fulfilling than their working career identity. But it doesn't happen overnight. Then consider the community that you have at work. Now, you may have a really strong social group of friends at work, or you may just have something closer to acquaintances. Either way, there is a community that is not easy to replace. Going into work, you have social interactions that happen almost by accident. To duplicate those same social interactions in retirement, you have to be intentional. They don't just happen to you. I personally believe this transition from working to retirement isn't talked about enough. It's one of the biggest life changes one will experience. You get in a routine of working for decades, and then one day you basically flip everything on its head and now retire. I commonly see new retirees disappointed in that first year as they experience angst in various ways due to this transition. It's easy to think something's wrong, that you may be better off just continuing to work. I think it's important to understand this is completely normal. It's to be expected even. Don't shy away from this questioning and angst, but rather lean into it, because on the other side can be an incredibly fulfilling retirement and the next phase of your life. Realization number 2, your risk tolerance changes as soon as you retire. Too often I see someone who is great at accumulating wealth. They almost treat accumulation as a game, and they do a fantastic job at saving and growing that money, typically through having a slightly higher risk tolerance, which again leads to more growth over the long term. When working, it can be easy to grit your teeth and avoid panicking when your portfolio is at a decline. After all, you don't need your portfolio anytime soon, and so many can be patient. Some investors then try to carry this patience and risk tolerance into retirement only to find it's a completely different animal. Your psychology around your portfolio will completely shift. In accumulation, there's always the possibility of coming back no matter how deep of a decline you get into. That idea, however, goes away in retirement. Now you have one bucket of money that needs to last you indefinitely. Rather than seeing a percentage loss in your portfolio, you now see losses in terms of the years of income that just evaporated. Some of the biggest mistakes that happen early in retirement come from risk tolerance mistakes. Certain retirees stay way too aggressive, and at the first sign of real volatility, it causes them to bail out on their long-term plan. Now, what can be a solution to this? Something we've talked about before on this channel called a rising equity glide path. I discussed this in the video right here. Rather than following the traditional logic of increasing safety as you age, you actually start retirement with the most safety you will have, and then slowly add growth the further you get away from retirement, or rather as you age. The interesting finding around this method is that it's actually been shown to increase probability of success while maximizing peace of mind early in retirement. Again, click on this video in the upper right-hand corner to learn more. Number 3, your pre-retirement worries generally aren't as bad as you make them out to be. This is something that a lot of retirees we work with learn through having a better plan. Take healthcare, for example. In our experience, healthcare is one of the biggest worries that retirees have when retiring prior to 65. I've had various interactions where someone is actually delaying retirement mainly because of this healthcare obstacle. They hear from a friend that might be retired and paying $2,000 plus per month for healthcare, and they think, well, heck, I'd rather just continue to work rather than spend that much on just one area of retirement that you may or may not even use. Well, that $2,000 plus per month healthcare bill should be the absolute worst case scenario. For example, the amount you pay in marketplace insurance depends on the income that you are able to report. By strategically withdrawing from your assets, Retirees can take a high amount of income in retirement, well above six figures, but still report a very low income, thus saving thousands per month on healthcare. So I'm sure there are a lot of people out there still delaying their retirement worried about healthcare costs, when their healthcare costs could actually be extremely affordable. This is essentially an overly exaggerated worry. And so as a pre-retiree, there's probably some main fear that you have that's holding back your retirement, either peace of mind or actually preventing you from retiring. It could be living off your assets, it could be healthcare, it could be some other fear I haven't mentioned. Oftentimes, the fear of this obstacle is a lot larger than the obstacle itself. So don't let these pre-retirement fears hold you back. Realization number 4, plans can quickly change, so don't lock yourself too much into one direct plan. Right now, you have a plan for what your retirement will look like. For some, this may be traveling the world for a few years. For others, this may be moving to a new state. Having an initial plan or vision for retirement is absolutely fantastic. You should put a lot of thought and intention into what your retirement should look like. But don't hold on to that vision too tightly or build a plan around this vision that can't be adjusted. More often than not, plans change. This is why we believe planning is much more important than a plan. Planning continually adjusts and adapts. I think the more that you can position your decisions to leave yourself with an easy, low-cost exit, the better. For instance, maybe right now you live in one of the northern states and plan to move to Arizona for warmer weather and a better retirement community. Sometimes that move works out perfectly. Other times, however, you get down to that new state and realize that you just traded one set of problems for another. Maybe your son or daughter started building a family and you realize that being closer to grandchildren is more important than the weather improvements. Now, if you went and bought a new house down south, only to turn around and sell it a year later, that can potentially be quite costly to your retirement. So anytime you can give yourself an easy exit, the better. Maybe instead of buying, you rent a place for a year. Make sure you are in the right geographic region you want to be in. Make sure that you like the lifestyle. Make sure that decision makes sense before you lock in that decision. The same thing with travel. You may plan to travel the world for 5 years and then settle down. You may come to find that continuous travel becomes monotonous and instead would rather go on a few trips each year. Make sure your plan has the ability to adjust and don't bet all your chips on one specific vision. Realization at number 5, the abundance of time that you have can be overwhelming initially. While working, many of us want more time. This is one of the biggest upsides of retirement, time freedom. But the transition into retirement doesn't just give us a little bit more time, it gives us a lot more time. You go from working 8 to 10 hours per day to now having that time block completely free. For those that have invested a lot in their careers, there often aren't hobbies to dive into that can easily replace this time. After all, career-focused individuals often put hobbies to the side to focus on said career. When I see retirees having a disappointing start to retirement, one of the main culprits is the inability to fill that time with energizing activities. Data on how the average retiree spends their time backs this up. For instance, from the chart on the screen, there is a clear trend of what mainly fills this time void, as you see from a full-time worker to a part-time worker to full-time retired. Time spent watching TV or on your electronics more than doubles from full-time work to full-time retirement. Interestingly enough, I don't know too many that start retirement and want to fill this time freedom with more TV. It just sort of happens unless you intentionally choose to go a different direction. Within the themes we've already discussed, it's all right to not have an immediate answer on how you will fill that time. I think you have to be willing to experiment and push yourself into new, often uncomfortable zones. Here are some questions that might help. What do you do already that you just absolutely love? Do you have a hobby that you can commit more time to? There's probably a marginally decreasing benefit as no one can do one hobby full time, but if you love cooking, there are a million ways you can double down on that hobby and thus have that increase in terms of a time allocation. What have you always wanted to try that has just continuously been pushed off? Have you always wanted to learn a second language or volunteer but never felt you had the time? Well, now you do. What activities put you in a flow state? A flow state is a mental state in which you are just completely locked in. There is a mind-body connection and you're completely present in the moment. Some people get this from writing. Some get this from physical activities like downhill skiing or biking. Whatever gets you into that flow state is a great direction to put your time and energies. Be willing to experiment and be intentional in using that time abundance. Realization number 6 is one that is not necessarily individual just to retirement, but rather more so just aging in general. At younger ages, your body can overcome an incredible amount. Most of us remember back to our 20s when we could use and abuse our bodies in terms of what we put in it, how much we slept, how much we exercised, and our bodies just rebounded from all of it. The gap from someone who is super healthy at age 20 to unhealthy at age 20 isn't that large because our bodies are so resilient. That gap, however, from healthy to unhealthy just continues to grow as you age. Someone really healthy at 70 versus someone really unhealthy at that age is a mild wide gap. Anytime I go to a race, like let's say a half marathon or even a marathon, it absolutely amazes me at the fitness that someone can achieve by working at it. It's not uncommon to see a 70-year-old woman absolutely giving her hell, running faster than some decades younger. On the flip side, you can take an unhealthy 70-year-old, and the exact opposite is true. That unhealthy individual might have trouble just walking, even sleeping. Everything seems to hurt all the time. And by the way, I'm not referring to disease that you maybe have little control over. I mean health in the sense of what you can control. Any way you slice it, aging is tough on the body, but you have tools at your disposal to combat the effects of aging. It's well known that bone density drops as part of the aging process. Well, guess what? Strength or resistance training has been shown to increase bone density, offsetting this trend of losing that bone density. Cardio health naturally declines for everyone as they age, but the gap from someone who works at cardio health versus someone that doesn't can be the difference between being able to still run late into retirement versus being able to barely walk. And so a focus on health should be a vital piece of how you filled that time abundance that we previously discussed. Then finally, realization number 7 may sound a little bit negative, but I promise it's not meant to be. Your past life will move on without you. There's a gentleman we work with who used to work at a mid-sized company and was in a pretty specialized IT role. He had worked for this company for some time and was really the only one that could perform his role adequately. Well, at 62, he was ready to retire and had the ability to do so. So he went into his boss's office to give his retirement notice. But based on the inability to quickly fill his role, his boss talked him into staying on for another 6 months. Well, this client agreed, mostly because he's an absolute stand-up guy and felt some loyalty to his company. Well, the problem was this 6-month add-on ended up turning into 12 months, which ended up turning into 2 years. All because of the loyalty this guy felt and the fact that it would be really hard for his company to replace his role. Now, I don't know the exact story, but his employer seemingly found a replacement and everything seemed to move on without him. After reflecting on the whole situation, this client had a bit of a bad taste in his mouth. And this is not really a one-off incident. I've seen this numerous times. A person ends up putting their life on hold because of a feeling of obligation to their employer or someone else, only to realize they were just delaying the inevitable. This gentleman gave his employer an extra gift of not having to find a replacement, but his personal cost was pretty high. Delaying retirement 2 years is a big deal. That's 2 years this person is never getting back. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't have any loyalty or you shouldn't give your employer ample notice, but after a period of time, your obligation is met. As important as you are inside of a company, know that your past life will exist without you. And I think that's a very freeing feeling. I hope talking through some of these common patterns and realizations helped you to prepare for your retirement. As you enter this next phase of your retirement, make sure that you're ready, both financially and mentally, because the first 5 years of retirement will be the most important. And would you look at that? Here's a video explaining why those first 5 years are the most critical. Click here to learn more, and always remember, you don't need more money. You need a better plan. We look forward to seeing you in the next video.